from self-discovery to unapologetic passion, from inner strength to outward influence. It's Your Turn charts the journey of empowerment. Welcome to our series, where the book comes to life. In each episode, we explore a chapter's wisdom through real stories. We uncover the strategies that turn potential into power. And we witness how one woman's journey can inspire countless others. Prepare to see yourself in these pages and voices, because with every story, we're reminded it's your turn to write the next chapter.
Hi, and welcome to this conversation I have with Alina Timofeeva. I am so thrilled to be with her because she is really a living example of a lot of things that I describe in the book, It's Your Turn. Alina is a multi-award winning strategic advisor in data and technology to major financial services organizations. She's a board member for the British Computer Society, the Chartered Institute for IT, a thought leader, and a sought-after speaker at large industry events. She has worked with leading consulting firms Oliver Wyman, KPMG, and Accenture, where she was recognized by multiple industry awards, including Digital Leader of the Year, Digital Transformation Leader, Cloud Professional of the Year, and Most Inspirational Individual of the Year. I can only imagine. She speaks on the topics of data and technology on TV and at large industry events, including World Economic Forum and London Tech Week. Alina overcame poverty and limited opportunities, transforming from a girl with no parents, no money, and no prospects to a successful multi-award winning businesswoman. Now she is a keen supporter of women and immigrants, empowering them through mentoring, talks, and podcasts, and sharing her key motto: failure is an opportunity to grow and take action. Alina is well known for her TED Talk, Fail But Never Give Up, that has over 510,000 unique viewers, was translated into 23 languages, and became the top 10 most watched TEDx released in December 21. The talk shows how failing an exam for a fast food chain can lead to 3 university degrees, career success, and become a role model for women in technology. Alina's commitment to education extends beyond her achievements. She founded Unique Bold You, an initiative focused on supporting people from diverse backgrounds to persevere despite failures. She empowers those from underrepresented groups to be seen, be heard, and be recognized. Alina, welcome to the It's Your Turn book interview. It's just an honor to have you here. How are you doing?
Thank you. Yes, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
It's amazing. Your story is amazing. It is very exceptional. And what I love about it is also how you use your own experiences to give back, to pay it forward. So I would like to start with the first question in terms of what motivates you to pave the way for future generations of women leaders, because this is a way to leave your legacy, right?
I think one of the things is when I came to UK 9 to 10 years ago, I came on my own. So I found it extremely difficult to come over to the UK for various reasons. And even when I did come to UK, I found it extremely difficult to settle within the UK because I got kicked out from various accommodations for the first 2-3 years. So I think the thing for me is I found it very difficult to find the people that actually want to invest in you not in a way that they get something back, that actually want to work with you or want to spend time with you. And I think even still, there is a lot of a gap in terms of the underrepresented groups in the community, even though that there is a lot of focus and talk in the industry about it. I still think in the reality, when you come to the organization, there is still a lot to be done. So I want to have an opportunity using my experience of various failures and not giving ups, but also just all the experience of perseverance to perhaps share it with the broader audience and see if it helps them. If it helps, that's great. If it doesn't, then it's fine. But I think at least that there is something which exists in the industry. And I think what I'm very much focused at the moment is if you look at technology specifically, there aren't many women. There aren't many underrepresented backgrounds, like those with disabilities, for example. And it's very hard to be heard and be seen. And in many of the cases, you do get shut down. And even though there is a lot of talk in the industry, I think my mission is to make sure that people are seen, heard, and recognized. And some of it comes from the industry, but some of it comes from perseverance of an individual.
That's beautiful. You are the living example. First of all, already people can just see you and be inspired because you are a role model. And it is amazing that you then also build the structures and the interactions and have the connections in order to help these people move forward. That's beautiful. Who was your inspiration? If you're looking at like women leaders pioneering, who was inspiring you the most?
I'll be very honest, I didn't really have inspirations that much. Maybe it's not the right answer to this question, but I think
That's okay. It's your answer. Yeah.
I think the challenge I've had is I was brought up in Russia. So I was brought up to be a housewife by my grandmother. And she was more of a view that I'm going to get married very young and I'm going to like cook for my husband, clean for my husband. And she didn't think I'm going to work in the industry. I'm going to go to UK. I'm going to do all these universities and stuff. So that wasn't the career model or the model which I was meant to follow. And even with my husband, when I met him, he saw me more as a housewife as well. So I think the inspiration is not necessarily the direct inspiration. It was more like going from something that you don't like to something that you think may be better. And in my case, I think the uniqueness is I am very persistent and I persist until I succeed. So I think I tend to hit quite a lot of walls. And I think in most of the cases, people say, can you do it? And then I do it. Or they say they can't do it. So then I still do it. And that is the thing that keeps motivating me. Rather than a particular person or individual who has been successful in something. I think in many of the cases, I see that the stories are different, of course, and there are certain things which are in common in terms of the patterns, like the perseverance, for example. But of course, that there is no direct, at least I haven't had a direct person as an inspiration. I think it's more, as I'm saying, the combination of the things, perhaps.
Yeah. And your own very strong vision on the life that you would like to lead, actually. Is that right?
I think the main for me is I didn't come from abundance, so I didn't come from money. So for me, the important thing was how do I get out of there? And subsequently, how do I grow and develop? And to be frank, I still fall back into the old pattern of kind of thinking that there is not enough abundance, but I'm persevering and I'm getting out of it. And I think I'm more surprised around the results which I tend to get.
Beautiful. If you look at the underrepresented groups that you somehow represent and at least support and inspire, and it's not only women, it's like you already gave different examples. So in what ways have you worked to cultivate emerging underrepresented groups or people and encourage them to pursue their dreams? What are you doing to lift them up exactly?
Yeah, so I think that there are a few things. So like I myself am a woman from a working class with a disability. So it's been a little bit hard for me to generally grow within the sector, but I still persevered. So I think what I am doing at the moment is a couple of things. So one is the initiative Unique Bold You, where essentially I'm recording all of my experience in more of a shorter version so that whilst I can do one-to-one sessions, it's much bigger in terms of the impact. And historically, I used to work really a lot. I used to work 70, 80 hours a week. So it was a little bit difficult for me to make an impact on too many people. So it was like one person, two people, but I want to make it at scale as much as possible. So it's essentially anything which I've learned, which helped, which didn't help. And it's around the things like building your profile, building your personal brand, being seen, being heard, being recognized, going through the difficult times, growing within your career, maybe if you're an immigrant, culturally fitting in. But more importantly, not just doing it for the purpose of tenacity only, but also understanding what is it you want to do and where your mission or passion lies and what is it you want to bring to the world. Because what I don't want to do, I don't want it to be purely transactional, that today you earn 50K and tomorrow you earn 200. The second thing is I'm working with the British Computer Society. So that is the largest IT society in UK and in Europe. And essentially what we are doing, we are driving the agenda for the UK government in terms of the technology priorities, for the universities as well in terms of the technology, and broader for the industry. For example, some of the things which we advocate for is that there are 500,000 women which are missing from our profession, and that we also have a lack of people with the disabilities who are included within the technology industry. And that, of course, things like the cyber resilience, the technology should be part of a choice that various students and school children have. So it's lobbying for that, not just at the level of talk, but more like at the university level, at the level of the government. So we would like to see the change there coming from the industry rather than the 1 or 2 or 3 people that you can touch. So I think to answer your question, I'm very much right now in terms of scaling everything rather than doing it in isolation. And this is why my mission is to inspire 50 million people. I think I have 1.5 right now, but I want to grow as much as possible. I think it's also, of course, how you measure it. But I think the growth is important. And I'm not necessarily looking at it from the monetary side. I look at it from the impact side, because I feel that this information or these stories need to be heard, not just mine, but the other people as well. And when you hear them, you try not just the stories, but the mechanisms. But it does help, in particular, if you're going through a difficult time, it helps stand up and to fight the system.
Absolutely. Why is it so important for you to empower these diverse voices and to ensure this variety of perspectives are represented in leadership, in organizations, in government, in the world in general?
I think historically we haven't really been heard. So, for example, in technology, there aren't many women. There are a lot of white men, which is a known fact. In some of the cases, it's very difficult to break into the industry. But if you think about it from the talent perspective, everybody is talented. Everybody has an ability and the capability. But I think it's more, how do you get the unique opportunities, right? For example, it's very challenging for people with disabilities to be necessarily having the same opportunities in the job space, because the job needs to make adjustments for them, and it's something different from a typical system, the way the system works. Obviously, the idea is you shouldn't be underprivileged or undermined for the reasons which are beyond your control, and the things like disabilities or your sex, your gender are clearly something which is part of your identity. So it's not something that you can change directly to fit into the system. And thereby I stand for the fact that the system needs to be able to bend so that it's not just for a certain set of people who may be privileged, but it's more for everybody, because if we get a voice from everybody in the community or in the industry, only then we can be heard and serving the whole industry rather than just pockets of people.
Yeah, it's clear that you have this vision of an inclusive and equitable future where people can all reach their full potential, and it will also benefit organizations, it will benefit the world in general. Any other things that you do in order to make progress toward that vision, and any ideas also for other people that you can inspire in order to contribute to that vision?
I think fundamentally it's about the potential, right? So I think in many of the cases, people themselves don't know their own potential. So I think it goes both ways. Like, you need to know what you are standing for yourself. So whether it's a personal brand or your unique identity or your unique individuality. So that's the first block. And I think what I advocate is it's very important to have an opinion of what you stand, for example, or to have an opinion of what really matters to you, so that you are not just one person in the system, but you have a vision and you have an opportunity to say something. I think the second thing is more from the industry or the government or the system, or however you call it, is to be able to hear those voices. And I think that the challenge right now is twofold. So it's either the individuals don't want to speak up or the system doesn't want to hear them. And it's like, how, if you go both ways, in theory, it's going to work. But the reality is that there are challenges on both of the sides. And I see quite a lot of the challenges that, whilst the system says that they want to be see that they want to hear the views. When they do hear the views, they don't always want to change. I think the reality, how to address it, is there are many people who try to break the system, and the more we hear about their stories, I think the more it's possible to have an opportunity to say, yes, if they could do it, I could do it. But at the same time, I do think that it's not just a reliance on the external sources. It's something which is driving you from inside in terms of making a change, making an impact. And in many of the cases, you can be the first person doing it for whatever the reason, and you may be not the most liked person, and probably you will be very disliked, but I think it's what stands versus your moral principles versus the liking of the system.
Mm-hmm. Once again, you are a woman in a male-dominated industry, but you achieve amazing things. What do you feel is it that you have as a woman to bring and to make these things happen, to disrupt that system? What leadership qualities, what gifts, what strengths is it that you bring in that might also be very inspirational for other women leaders to have or to develop or to manifest?
To be honest, it depends on the environment where you are in, because what I found, you can be successful in one environment and less successful in another environment. So I can't necessarily say these are the three things and they helped me in every single environment, because I think, as I mentioned, it goes both ways. And the main thing that helped me is the perseverance and never giving up, because it's kind of part of my story. And the second thing is I am very keen to grow, to develop, to make money for the company. And I am very not delighted, but I'm very committed to the job. Like, I have a very good job ethics, very strong job ethics, which people recognize. But the reality is that the experiences could be different environment to environment. So there is no one single bullet point. I think the thing which I want to learn more, and I think maybe that's also important for other people, is I still have this element of external validation, which kind of can go up and can go down, because if I win a award or applaud, that's one thing. If people don't applaud, you get disappointed. So I think the quality which I want to develop in myself, and which I think other people would benefit from as well, is something like equanimity, so that you don't always compete, or if you win, you get happy. If you lose, you get unhappy, but you're less intense in your feelings to either the success or the loss. Because I think in the business where I work in, you sometimes win, sometimes you lose, and it's not necessarily within the internal structure of the organization, which can also be challenging. But it's like with everything, if you want to be seen and heard, if you want to pitch to magazines, if you want to win client work, most of the time you get rejections, and then finally you get a success story, and then it grows, right? So the whole thing I advocate for is, it's very likely that you are not going to be accepted, and it's very likely you're going to be rejected, either externally or within the organization, or in both of the places. So I think it's more that you do persevere, but you can do it in a more equanimous way, so that it doesn't make you too nervous or too unhappy if something doesn't go your way.
Yeah. Beautiful. It takes two to tango. So if you look at organizations, if you look at countries, if you look at the landscape and you see how it changes and progresses, or yes or not, what gives you hope when considering the future of women in leadership, when you look at organizations and governments?
There is definitely a push, at least in the UK, to have more women in leadership roles. I think the challenge sometimes happens is you recruit the women in the senior leaders role, but then perhaps you can't give them all the opportunities to progress, or you may not have the culture which is inclusive enough to sustain those senior women. So again, it's happening in parallel. So it's not just about the recruitment, it's not just about paying them money to those women to be your face, but it's rebuilding the culture internally to make sure that those women feel good within the organization. I think that there is definitely progress, at least it's on top of the agenda. That's positive, but there are still more to be done, because obviously we still have not as many women as we would like to see. We still have not as many women in leadership roles as we would like to see. And we still hear about different cases when senior women leave the organizations because of burnout, or because of stressful situation, or perhaps because of lack of support. So there are instances when this continues to happen. And I think with the women, we see quite a lot of them maybe coming in, but then leaving as well.
Yeah, absolutely. For the women reading the book and watching this conversation, what small everyday acts can they do? If I'm sure they're inspired by your story, and if they want to jump into that, what small everyday acts do you believe can accumulate over time to drive meaningful change also for them?
You mean the change for the person themselves or the change for the industry?
I would say the change for themselves and how they can make this bigger, how they can make this also something for their stakeholders or for the people that work with them or work for them.
For me, the most successful thing was taking the risk, because the ambiguity of not knowing what will happen if this happens or that happens or could happen kind of brings a lot of anxiety, and it starts eating you from inside most of the time. So I think I tend to take the risk and then see how it goes. And it doesn't always go well, but it can go well as well. But the thing, there is a technique which I learned actually in a small town in Russia. And there are like various questions. It's around 10 questions, but it's things like you think, not necessarily what you are grateful for, but it's you recognize the more positive things that happened in your day. So it's like things, what you saw, what inspired you, what you liked, what conversation has happened. So that's one part. The second part, and I do really believe that it's very important, is that you are the creator of your own life. So, for example, if you want to be connected to a person who you've never seen before, or who you think is such a superb superstar, I don't know, some celebrity or somebody who is some guru, you can still picture it in your head that it's going to happen. And then you can build not only the visionary part, but you can actually go and take the steps, and with time it's going to happen. So to give you an idea, I never thought that I'm going to speak at the World Economic Forum, because World Economic Forum, when you go there, it's like the CEOs of different like people, companies, etc. So what happened is I was actually sitting at home. There was a friend of mine who actually came as also as part of this whole universe of how to be a creator of your own life. Like he was like, oh, I'm going to the World Economic Forum. Do you want to come? And I was like, okay, fine. And that was like a Friday, and there was absolutely nothing which was booked for me in the World Economic Forum. So I had no events, I had no gigs, I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any speaking engagements. And then I think when I came there, I was quite active and proactive, and I hustled. And there were opportunities to go to events that supposedly had 5,000 people on the waiting lists. And there were opportunities to meet like famous people who you think you will never meet. And there were opportunities. I got an opportunity to speak, which was very nice, about the work which I've been doing in technology. So I can now put it on my CV. But at the same time, I recognized that there were people from my company that came here as part of the formal delegation, right? And the people that came were the global CEOs. And obviously, it will take me a bit of time to be the global CEO. But I think the thing to answer your question is probably you shouldn't be afraid that because something is too far away from you, you need to be a global CEO to go to the World Economic Forum. You can still go there if you are not a global CEO. And you can still get to talk in the same way as the global CEO. In fact, what happened to me, which was very funny, is I came and there was a senior partner there, and he was talking about analytics, which is what I do as well. And I asked him how he got there, and he said he just came and he's crashing in a Airbnb because there's nothing available, and then he's going to do this little talk and then he's going to go home. But he was like a senior partner, and he asked me, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm also doing a talk, and I'm actually very happy about it. So there are these kind of unique opportunities. If you picture it in your head that you want to do something, or you think that you don't know how to do it, but there is nothing that limits you from doing it. I think it's more being open to the fact that even if it's not logical, even if everybody says it's not going to happen, it's more that there is always a possibility. And there is an element of being active, proactive, and being seen and heard and recognized, and obviously a level of tenacity. But it's more like that there are the opportunities if you choose to create them.
I love that. I think that is great advice for younger people, emerging leaders, or leaders who say, I don't know if I have these opportunities. I never have these situations. I've never been in this kind of context. I believe that it is about, like you say, it is about saying yes to opportunities and see what happens and just be there in your strength and in your confidence. It's a beautiful example and it's amazing. Being able to speak on the World Economic Forum is not something that anybody can do. Kudos for you. That's beautiful. Yeah. So when we're talking about possibilities, what is it that inspires you to continually envision new possibilities, expand your goals, think bigger? How do you find the energy for that?
I don't think that there is a particular answer to that. I think it's still, see, I'm sitting here and we're talking that I'm such a successful woman, but I think I still get quite a lot of rejections even now for a variety of reasons, even in my workspace, even if I go to clients, right? So I still get rejected. And to be honest, I still get quite hurt about that, which is probably not the positive side because you're meant to be equanimous. But I think what is driving me to look for the opportunities is, first of all, I do get quite bored because I'm like, oh, I achieved this and this. And there was actually an advertisement I've seen yesterday on the tube. There was Serena Williams, and there was like this huge thing which said, been there, won this. And then there was like this Nike thing, which is just do it. So I think that there is a bit of a thing that you think, oh, you've done it and you want to do something else, right? Or you want to do something new. I think in my case, it was more that I want to grow from being like an operator to being ultimately the influence and the leader, right? So I'm all about the scale, and that's something which is inspiring me personally, because I think doing it for one person, for one company, for one, I don't know, client, it's good, but I think it's only you will get seen and noticed when it runs at scale. And that's something which I want to keep doing as much as possible. What drives me is more, and still rejections in some shape or form. You would always find somebody who's smarter than you, nicer than you. Or somebody who's going to say that everything you do is horrible, even though you are a multi-award person, which is always disappointing. But I think it's kind of part of it. To answer your question, is it gets boring if you just do the business as usual. The second part is you want to make an impact and you want to scale. And the third part is you still get rejections, and unless you are incapacitated, I think that's the word, you will always keep going on and persevering. I think I've seen the thing from Celine Dion, and Celine Dion, she was saying, because she had a health issue, she was saying, if you don't run, you walk. If you don't walk, you crawl. And I think some of the examples which I found very inspirational is, and I didn't know them before, I just found them a couple of days ago. For example, there is Sharon Stone, and she was like really
That's amazing.
but then she had a stroke, and then the question is, how do you get out of it? In my case, I have incurred a disability, and even though I'm like pretty young, it did hit on me pretty badly. So it was more like, how do you get out of this situation? But then how do you need to pivot what you can do, what you can't do? You have to pivot how your brain works, because it may not work as fast as it used to be before. So you have to live with it, but at the same time, you still want to be ambitious and successful. So how do you do it if you're not doing exactly the same thing as you used to do before?
Yeah. I love that, and thank you for sharing that, Alina. We tend to think that success is linear, yes, that you just build. I know, and everybody knows that reality and what the universe brings you, what life brings you, is curly. It's up and down, and there's nobody who can say that they build success after success. The thing is that how it sometimes is shown in the media, how people really dress it up, is everything is always perfect and nothing goes wrong. And everybody knows that is not the truth. But still, it is like a concept that is leading us in terms of defining success. I really like the concept of defining success on your own terms, and also looking at vision and mission and realizing that day by day and step by step, and sometimes with a big leap, and then sometimes there's like some plateau. That's basically what is human and what is realistic. And if you're looking at success as a constant growth, then of course you will be disappointed. Yeah, absolutely. And I
But
think that it is.
I think you can still try to find kind of the positives, because if I tell you an example of the disability, like I was in extensive pain, but for example, what it did help me is to be more empathetic to the other people. And that wasn't necessarily the number one characteristics I used to possess.
Yeah.
I think it still gives you a different example or a different experience. So I had to learn a lot about psychology or around like some of the things I never thought I'm going to learn. And I think you could argue in one way it can slow you down, but in another way it gives you an opportunity to develop something else in terms of the skill set or mindset or perception. And they say you need to be grateful for all the different experiences. I can tell you when I did encourage, I was not very happy because it was very painful. But ultimately, it gives you a different perspective, which perhaps you didn't think before. And then I'm coming quite a lot from the mission and the vision, and perhaps this kind of came out of that story much more than before.
Yeah, beautiful. So when do you feel that you have demonstrated courage to redefine boundaries? Because you just told me sometimes I run into boundaries. There's people that are not working with me. There's disappointment. So how have you been able to redefine boundaries and cultivate new domains in order to proceed in your story and your mission?
Most of the time people say no, and finally they say yes. The reality is I don't have an answer because everybody has a very different way. I mean, I see that there are two options. One is you break the system, or two, you leave the system. If the system doesn't want to change, if you tried 100 times, if they still don't want to change, maybe you need to leave it out to just save your own mental peace. Or it could be that you can hit yourself against the wall. I tend to hit myself against the wall, and then typically in the end, I tend to get through. That's my story, but I do know that people advocate more and more now that you need to come out faster so as not to fail for too long. And I think one thing which I started noticing is, as exactly the same person, you can be successful in one environment and not successful in another environment. The question comes, if you feel miserable or something is not happening for you, is it purely you or is it the environment? So unless you changed you can of course change yourself if you wish to, but I think that there is sometimes this environment thing which needs to be changed.
Yeah. Beautiful. What mindsets help you adapt ambitions progressively in the face of obstacles? So how do you really work, I would say, against, around, above? You just said you can remove, you can change environments, but I believe that you also can develop yourself, grow belief mindsets, grow empowered mindsets. How does that work for you?
Most of my story is I persevere, and then people say no, and then I persevere, and then something happens. The question is, with the mindset, there is this whole idea how to see the unlimited opportunities. I do still think that even though that there are the concepts of limiting beliefs, unlimited beliefs, I still think that even though you work through it and there are various techniques of doing that, I still think that in the reality, there may be something which is left behind in your mind, unless you like completely manage to get through to it. I never managed to completely go through it. I think I still have limiting beliefs, and I still think that those limiting beliefs, you know, they evolve as well. So it's not the same limiting this year as it was last year, but they still happen. So I can't go and say that I'm completely limitless of all.
We all have them, of course. Yeah.
So I think that's a thing which is different. I think for me, it's more keep going and then things happen, and sometimes they don't happen. As I'm saying, for me, the main thing which I'm learning is not to get that upset if they don't happen or that frustrated, and just to try to get yourself out of that. I think I'm still that because I do have a lot of anxiety if people don't like me or are completely unhappy about me, or I don't know. So there's still this thing, but I think I'm learning that, and I was doing more like the various therapy stuff to try to dissect myself from the external validation.
It's beautiful, Alina, that you're sharing that, because this humanity is so important, because we sometimes look at people that achieve amazing things, and you are a person that has achieved amazing things, and we think they must be perfect, and we are not perfect, so we will not be able to achieve amazing things. And when you share this, that you also struggle, that you also still have limiting beliefs, it makes it a lot more also resonating for people that have that ambition to do big things, but that feel that like they're not perfect. And it's like you say, you don't have to be perfect in order to achieve amazing things. It's about your perseverance, your persistence, absolutely, also to have a mission and have a vision on the world that you want to live in. And you definitely have that. And kudos for you for being straightforward in that and so clear in that, and activating whatever you can activate in order to contribute to that vision and that mission. That is just amazing. My last question would be, what final guidance or advice would you give that want to do these big things, that have this idea, that have this vision of how the world should look like, how they can contribute, but they're still not there? What could be like your jumpstart advice for
I
them?
think don't believe everything on TV and social media, because everybody struggles and they never talk about it, but they do struggle in some shape or form. And I think it's becoming more often right now that you start seeing these movies or the stories or the exhibitions that some celebrities who achieved a lot of stuff, they struggled with, I don't know, mental health, for example. So it's coming out as a topic, but you don't still see it in the industry.
Yeah.
Much. And I don't know, if I went to my boss or my former boss, I can't imagine him telling me, oh my God, I don't know, I have so much anxiety when I go to work or something else. So there is still a level of, wouldn't say that lack of truth, but more the lack of transparency in terms of what people experience. And because of this, you feel when you are struggling that perhaps you are the only one struggling, and it makes you feel quite, I don't know, small and maybe miserable and helpless. But the reality is that everybody struggles in some
Yeah.
shape. For example, the challenges, even though we talk I'm very successful, like in the last couple of years, I had a death in my family, I had a war, I had like domestic abuse, and I had quite a few other things. But I don't, if you look at my social media, it doesn't necessarily talk about that. But the reality is like everybody goes through stuff, and sometimes you go in patterns or you go collectively at a period of time, which happened to me, and then nobody talks about it, but it doesn't mean
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. People talk about it in statistics, for example, like they say 60% of women is on medication for sleep problems or depression. And that's something that hangs there, but it's not translated into a reality. So women don't know who are their peers. That is why it is also so important to build these communities with like-minded women that can be vulnerable and where people can support each other. Because a lot of what is going on in the world, and especially social media, are stimulating that. It's judgment. It's good or bad. It's the likes. It's being the beautiful, shiny people. And behind the scenes, there's so many, I would say, misery or problems or issues or struggles. Well, if you can share that, women have the capacity to lift each other up and to help each other. And I'm very much also in favor of building and creating these communities and these safe spaces where you can really hold a space for women to talk and to be open and to look for mentoring or for coaching or for just interaction with like-minded women. And I don't know how you feel about that, and what is your experience with that, and how you can use this in order to achieve more also integration and inclusion of the underrepresented. How does that feel? How does that look like?
I think the reality is that there is still a lot of stigma around it. So, for example, I don't know if you knew about the Middle East crisis, right? People start helping you, but nobody necessarily knows what is going internally in your family, for example, right?
Mhm.
So, it
Yeah.
becomes more complicated. Do you tell people about it? Do you not tell people? If you tell people, are you judged? Do people want to help? Do people not want to help? So, there is still a lot of stigma around it. And I haven't quite cracked it down. I think the reality is it would be nice if not everything looks so perfect and polished, but I think it's also the empathy that surrounds the society, so that it's not that you say, oh, something happened, and then somebody says, oh, maybe you shouldn't be here, for example, or something like this. So it's the both ways, because I think people sometimes do get afraid that they can be hurt if they open up, and sometimes they do open up and they do get hurt, which then why would they do it again and again? So it's not just the individual sharing it, but it's how the other individual would be willing to accept it or decline it. And I think historically people do it through therapy, but I haven't seen it through the circles of women or men
Communities.
or whatever circles of the people.
Yeah.
I think it depends. I haven't seen a successful circle like that. Maybe it exists, but I do think that there is an opportunity to create something like this. Yes.
Beautiful. Yeah, where we can be brilliant and imperfect at the same time and feel supported, and that would be amazing. Beautiful. Alina, thank you so much for all your input and your wisdom and your contribution, and for being so open and sharing your ideas and your vision, and also the struggles that go around that. I think it is so important to understand that even the greatest ideas, the greatest plans, the greatest visionaries also struggle, and that is just human. It is about how to overcome, and you have this perseverance that is absolutely in your DNA. It is really spicing your stories. I invite you, when you listen or watch this episode, to check Alina's TED Talk, to check her website, and to see if you can contribute, because she has an amazing mission. And as she already said, she's looking for a platform, for visibility, for authority, in order to have all these underrepresented people entered into the society in a way that they can contribute, that they are meaningful, that we can really use their gifts and their strengths, and that there is an interaction. So connect with her, connect with the book, work in the book, work on the implementation of what we're doing here with It's Your Turn, so that it is actually becoming also your turn. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you, Alina. You rock. You're amazing. Thank you so much.